So I'm here with Paul Harris. Paul, welcome back. It's always great to have you back.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Lauren. Always appreciate that.
So you're the organizer, you're the editor of I've always known your publication as Colombia Gold Letter. I know that you have been expanding. Now you're doing more and more in Ecuador. And we want to talk about that and understand the broader scope that you have now, but then also talk about it's good to see that the Columbia Gold Symposium continues to grow. I noticed that you've changed the venue. It's now going to be at the Hotel Intercontinental, which I think provides more space for exhibits and meetings. But the event, as far back as I can remember, and I've attended for the last 5 or 6 years, I believe, has always been full. So tell me about what precipitated the change of venue, and tell me about how the scope may be evolving or changing.
Absolutely. Now, this year will be our seventh event. It's every year in November. And a couple of years ago, because of our success, because we were, every year selling out, we were becoming constrained by the size of the venue. Previously, we were in the San Fernando Plaza. So we were planning on shifting the event to the Hotel Intercontinental here in Medellin because it's a much bigger hotel. It's got a much bigger sort of conference space. That plan was derailed a little bit by sort of COVID. Obviously, in 2020, we did a virtual event because of lockdown and people couldn't travel. And then in 2021, last year, when things started opening up, we weren't certain to what extent and how quickly things would open up, to what extent people would want to travel and things of that nature. So last year we held it in the Marriott Hotel, which was a really, really good venue, and it was a great event. But it is a venue that is very size restricted. And so, this year we're at the Hotel Intercontinental because it's got a conference facility where we can have 400 or 500 people. We can have a much bigger exhibition space. And so that's really the plan. It's going to be a 2-day event, again, as it has been every year. Again, a big focus on the projects. It's now really called CGS Medellin, Copper Gold Symposium Medellin. And that's because, as you alluded to, earlier this year in June, we did our first event in Quito, which is CGS Quito, Copper Gold Symposium Quito. And so CGS Medellin focused on the copper and gold projects in Colombia and hopefully the broader region as well. One of the key things this year will be discussing the change of government, which is due to take office. The government of Gustavo Petro is due to take office very, very soon. And so a key thing we'll be discussing how that government is relating to the mining sector, how it's looking to manage and develop the mining sector, policy changes, things of that nature. So it promises to be sort of a very exciting and very important event this year.
You bring up some good points, and the event's always great. We do have a new incoming administration here in Colombia. I spoke recently at the Oil and Gas Congress in Bogota, and it was interesting because I spoke, and the event had long been planned, but it was the week right after the election, and there was a lot of panic is too strong of a word, but I think fear is not an exaggeration. I was speaking to a crowd that was all involved in the petroleum industry. We had service providers to the petroleum industry, engineering firms, and people who sold products. And the incoming administration, the candidate, had some very strong words directed at the petroleum industry. Um, but with mining, I haven't heard as much, I guess, hostility during the campaign trail. His vice president has a history with the mining sector. I'm not as much of an expert to understand if her activities were really more towards, my understanding was more towards illegal mining. I don't know if she has a history when it comes to commercial mining. But what's your take on and I'm really interested in your opinion, and also you're taking the pulse of the sector, and as you talk to people, as that's your specialty, what what your sense is as far as the optimism or pessimism or uncertainty from the mining sector with regards to what the policies might be with the new administration.
Well, Lauren, that's a very big question. And there's a lot of unknowns yet. You've mentioned a few things. The first one is uh, Gustavo Petro hasn't yet taken office. So we're still yet to see exactly what he's going to do. He hasn't really sort of laid out his plans. He has named a mining and energy minister, and it is somebody that's a mining engineer. That has generally been seen as a positive in as much as presumably he has an understanding of the sector and some of its issues, its potential as well. He Gustavo Petro has spoken out, as you mentioned, against the oil and gas sector. He's stated categorically that there's going to be no fracking on his watch, and he wants Colombia to be less dependent on the oil and gas and coal sector for income generation. He hasn't really pronounced so much on the mining sector. By mining sector, we're talking here about hard rock mining, so sort of gold, copper, silver, things of that nature. That sector is a much smaller sector in Colombia than the oil and gas. Um, it is a sector that typically employs more people than the oil and gas sector does. So there could be a differentiation in his approach to the two sectors or subsectors because a lot of people are employed in the mining sector, and he's positioned himself as a president for the people, one who's going to create opportunity and work towards greater equality in various different spheres. So from that point of view, one could imagine that he might embrace the mining sector because of its ability to create a lot of jobs in rural areas, areas that typically have not received a great deal of development or economic benefit and have traditionally been ignored by the central government out of Bogota. Your reference to the vice president, Francie, is perhaps could be instructive there. Way back when, right in the early years of her life, I believe she was an artisanal miner in a really very basic form, in the streams, panning gold, that kind of activity. So that's a huge activity in Colombia. Tens of thousands of people earn their sort of daily bread through that activity. So one would expect the Petro administration to try and work to help that sector, to help perhaps formalize it, to help give that people working in that sector greater access to the financial system, greater access to health, to education, things of that, which historically they have not had access to. Well, it's unclear what the Petro administration will mean for sort of more formal mining with larger companies. On the one hand, he could see them as put them in the same bucket as the oil and gas sector, see them as let's say sort of the enemy. On the other hand, he could embrace them as a means of creating economic opportunity in rural areas. And time will tell.
I think that also it's easier to hold a commercial mining operation accountable, demand that they have things like environmental risk insurance, they're paying their taxes, employee labor laws. I know that there have been some innovations with some of the commercial mine operations where they're actually working with artisanal miners saying, hey, don't go and get some cyanide or mercury and poison the streams, bring your ore to us and we'll process it for you. So I think that that would be an incentive, and it also is a way to keep artisanal miners from working with mafias and those type of organizations at the margins of the law. So he might be able to leverage the commercial mining activity as a social lever with the artisanal miners. No.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of the formal mining companies and exploration companies do have programs to work with artisanal miners to help them with things such as improving their environmental performance, helping them get a better or fairer price for their product, helping them with things like health and safety, helping them formalize so they can get access to the financial system, legally trade the gold that they produce, get access to the social security service in Colombia, and health and things like that. It really depends on the viewpoint or the attitude the incoming government takes. As I mentioned, on the one hand, there's the view, or there can be the view, that miners is an activity run by foreign companies that are here to exploit us. On the other hand, there's another view that because mining and exploration companies are very embedded in rural communities where the state often does not reach, they do and can act as a real sort of pole or center, a fulcrum for the local economy, generating prosperity, generating benefits, generating a local tax base, so the local mayors actually have money to spend, to invest in different things. It may be that the administration doesn't have that nuance, or doesn't see them like that. I will state, speaking to somebody in the Ministry of Mining and Energy today, they've been going through the handover process with the incoming government, and the comments I got was that process has gone really well. They've been really sort of engaged and really interested to sort of get up to speed with things. So for me, that's an indication that some of this momentum will carry across into the new administration. And at the end of the day, let's not forget, Gustavo Petro, he wants to invest more in health. He wants to invest more in education. He wants to invest more in develop, social opportunity and social equality. All of these things cost money, and the money has to come from somewhere. A lot of Colombia's budget, or national budget, comes from what it receives from resource exploitation. So it would seem to be short-sighted for the incoming administration to sort of try and to do something that would cut that off, because it would impact its ability to deliver its election promises.
This topic actually reminded me of something, and that is that you now have, as part of the symposium, there's like an awards ceremony for ESG, for environmental, social, and governance. And I almost forgot, and I'm glad that we kind of got onto this topic, because that's something that we want to highlight, because you and I have both seen, when a mining company or even a petroleum company, when they have an accident, or like what happened down there in Brazil with that dam, or when there's some kind of when a company is a bad actor and does things wrong, it makes global news. It's all headlines on the other side of the world. But when companies do things right, I look at social inclusion. I look at the all women rescue team that went to the mining Olympics a couple years ago, back I think with Continental. I think about a lot of the different I've seen things, and you have too, on the ground, where I've seen some mines that go in and make a commitment to purchase goods and services from right there, the local community. There's bad news, but there's a lot of good news, and it's weird because the good news doesn't make the headlines. Maybe my publication, maybe your publication, but the broad, mass market publications, not necessarily. And so I think that award ceremony that is given out at your event is something that that's worth mentioning and worth paying attention to. If you could speak briefly on that.
Absolutely, and I fully agree with you there. Companies generally have their ESG programs. They do various different things depending upon the needs of the local area that they work in, and more often than not, the things they do with the environment, restoring environments, or planting trees, that does get attention. The things they do, the Women in Mining Initiative, or employing women, training women, that tends to get some attention as well. But last year we launched the CGS Economic Development Awards, because in addition to creating jobs and putting money into social programs, a lot of companies help or leverage their own expertise to help foster the development of local businesses, pioneers, if you like, in the areas where they operate. They can bring sort of expertise, they can bring sort of distribution, they can bring seed capital, all these things to help local people develop their own businesses. and not be fully, completely dependent on the presence of a mining project. And this was very successful. And the winning company last year was Royal Road Minerals, and their project was basically like an incubator or venture capital company, providing seed capital for local companies to start up and to get going. And it's been very, very successful. And this was something that I thought was fantastic. More people need to know about. Other companies perhaps need to replicate this. And so the idea of the awards was to give recognition and to show the industry in general that there are many, many different ways that they can be a positive actor and create positive benefits over and beyond having a mining project and creating jobs and generating taxes.
Absolutely, I'm familiar with Royal Road. They run a good operation. Now, for those that want to attend or perhaps participate as a sponsor, you always have great exhibit space. But, it's Wellington. I met the former Canadian ambassador at the event, all types of different dignitaries and things like that. I'll put the link in the podcast notes, but if you could share with us just what the website or links are for those that want to contact you.
Absolutely. The website is www.colombiagold.co. My email is paul.corresponsal@gmail.com. More than happy to talk to anyone about participating as a delegate, potentially participating on the speaker program, or the commercial opportunities that you mentioned. Over the 7 years, the event really has grown, acquired quite a lot of a momentum. Each year we typically have in the commercial exhibit, the Colombian government, whether it's the National Mining Agency and or the Colombian Geological Survey, they typically have a booth so they can engage and meet people. Last year, the past couple of years, we've had a delegation from Canada, a trade mission from Canada. This year, it looks like we're going to have, in addition to the Canadians, we're talking, a Chinese group wants to bring a mission in or delegation in, Sweden, and also Australia as well. So we really are going to have a very international focus this year.
It's always top quality. It's always, I block it off on my calendar every year. It's the most important event, especially when you talk about having a cross section. There are some other events that are like, they've got the cranes and the bulldozers and things like that. But this is really an event where you have people who are in operations, you have people who are in ESG, you have mining executives, and just as important, with us being Finance Colombia, you have the investment sector. You have people who are in some of the intermediate finance, NG Gold, I believe, some of the major private equity companies that focus on mining have been there, whether they're from Canada, as far away as Australia. I always learn something. You have the geologists that do the short course. I need to get in early. Every year they're sold out before I'm ready to buy it, and I always want to attend that. That. And so I'm looking forward to it. And I appreciate your time. And as always, it's great to talk to you. And I think I still owe you a lunch, so we'll get together here soon.
Well, I look forward to that. I appreciate the time and happy to have a talk with you about this, Lauren. Thank you very much for your help. Look forward to seeing you. The event's on the 8th and 9th of November, but I look forward to seeing you before then.
Absolutely.
Flying differently make us feel alive. Landing with opportunities make us the Viva Foundation, the first and only airline foundation in Colombia, committed to helping those who wish to reach higher.